Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. I hope you enjoy. Story number 1, Water and Ash, written by Something Touches Back. It's no good. The old Crulian navigator sat heavily on his thighs, every feather drooping in resignation as he repeated itself. It's no good. Yes, I can get the anti-grav working and get us back into orbit. But for what? We were thrown light years, of course, so nobody knows where to look for us. The interstellar comms and emergency beacon antennas burnt out in the atmosphere, so we can't call for help. And look here, the topside turret collapsed in on itself on impact, spewing heavy bearing grease all over the porthole generator's optics. Without a hyperspace porthole, we cannot escape the system. We're gonna die here. Perhaps, said Cody, but not today. Get some rest, Cather, and I'll go find us something to eat. Navigator Cather followed Cody to an open airlock, stopping just inside the badly damaged ship as Cody continued out across the low green ground cover towards the scree slope in the distance. The meadow in which the small scout ship had unceremoniously plummeted was in rolling hills, surrounded by forest, which in turn gave way to ice-covered mountains. The captain had somehow gotten them down before succumbing to his injuries, when the engineer died in the crash. Now it was just Cather and Cody. Cather had never served with a non-Crudian before, and had no idea what the captain was thinking, bringing a human on board as an apprentice. As Cather watched, Cody, in the distance, appeared to be rummaging around in the scree slope before abruptly sitting down. A sharp sound told Cather that Cody was smashing rocks together. Yes, they were going to die here, Cather and this young idiot. Cather shuffled back inside to see if he could do anything useful. A couple of hours had passed before a sound pulled Cather back to the airlock. A heavy wrench at the ready. It was Cody, now walking with the aid of a long pointy stick and struggling under the weight of a large carcass slung over his back. "Hey, Cather," said Cody, "do you think you could use the welding torch to get a fire burning out there somewhere? I prefer my meat cooked." Cody emphasized meat by heaving the carcass onto the ground about 6 meters away from the spacecraft. He then rolled it onto its back, exposing that he had already slit it open and removed its internal organs. Soon, Cody was working his way around the body, punching the skin away from the meat and cutting where necessary with a... Cather wandered over to get a better look. A rock? "How are you doing that?" asked Cather. "How come there isn't a single decent bladed tool in this whole spacecraft?" retorted Cody. "This is just a chunk of obsidian from the scree slope that I bifacially napped to make a basic hand axe. It's what I use to cut and sharpen my spear, so, a fire?" Cather looked around. "Oh, right, I'll get the torch." "Grab a couple metal pots and something that can be used as a funnel while you're at it," said Cody, already abandoning the carcass to gather some firewood. It was becoming clear to Cody that Cather was more of an indoor Crulian than likely had no idea how to make a fire out of natural wood. Besides, for the fire, Cody specifically wanted hardwoods with minimal pitch or creosote. More time passed, and with much work from Cody and not nearly as much from Cather, many small chunks of meat skewered onto freshly cut and peeled branches were roasting over a bed of brightly glowing coals, while globs of fat and oil dripped out in splashes of fire. Cather was sure the smell would attract some larger predator. It was undoubtedly attracting him. Cather moved closer to the comforting light and delicious smell. Cody, meanwhile, was busy packing ash from the fire into a funnel. When he felt he had enough crammed in there, he used one pot to pour water from a nearby rainwater puddle into the funnel, through which it drained into the other pot. Cather was fascinated as he was clueless. Was Cody hoping to somehow purify the water by pouring it through the ash? Shouldn't he be using charcoal instead? But when the lower pot was full, Cody moved it to the hot coals. Then he took what had been his water pot and put all the fat he had carved from the carcass into it. This, too, went onto the charcoals to heat. At least Cather understood this part. Cather's mother had rendered fat to make pure tallow that could be used for certain pastry doughs. Night fell. The temperature dropped, and still Cody worked with his pots. The rapidly decreasing temperature did have the advantage of cooling the fat faster. Once it cooled, Cody pulled the light-colored disc of tallow from the top of the remaining liquid, dumped the fluid, and then remelted the tallow. By the third time he did this, the night was half over, and the tallow was nearly white. Finally, Cody poured the now tepid ash water into the remelted white tallow, stirring constantly and occasionally interrupting his pour to let the mixture get thoroughly blended. The old crudium had long since gone to bed, and still Cody poured and stirred. The first hint of dawn appeared when Cody was finally satisfied, tipping the pot contents onto a towel. He checked his white cake of glop one more time before nodding smugly to himself. Cody took a break to eat more of the long cold meat and checked the campsite before carrying his precious mound of white glop into the spacecraft. Gather woke to the sound of Cody rustling around in the porthole generator room. Inside, he found Cody rubbing a wet cloth on a cake of white stuff before rubbing it on the optical lens. Wash, rinse, dry. Half of the porthole generator was already spotless. Turning, Cody said, "Well, good morning, Gather. Do you think that you can get us into orbit so that we can see if this thing will open a portal for us? I'm ready to go home." Gather inspected the porthole generator closer. "I've never worked with a human before. Are they all like you? I gotta say, you're all right, kid." Then looking at the white mound in the towel, "How did you know how to do that?" "It's an old family wisdom," said Cody. "The cake is a lie." End of story. Story number 2, The New One, written by Fred Lowe. No one really knew when she first showed up in the chambers. She had your basic bipedal vertebrate body type, though a bit shorter, but more upright than a few of the others. Since she never spoke and kept out of the way, we really didn't mind her. After a short while, she was pretty much forgotten. No matter what the discourse was, she sat back to the rear, out of the way, silent. She was seemingly ignored by everyone, with the exception of myself. She looked out of place, her long blue and green hair, pale skin, and her deep blue eyes, and shorter stature than most. She appeared to have 2 eyes, however. One was obstructed by some sort of covering surrounded by a scar in her skin. I have no idea what could have happened to cause something like that. Bucking the trend the rest of us followed, she wasn't wearing the draped cloth, or even a nude like a few others I'd seen. She wore a thick but flexible black material with silver accents that seemed doubly thick near the joints. A few chains decorated her waist, while high and thick coverings surrounded her feet. Stress creases could be seen throughout. Whatever the material was, it seemed to have been worn for quite some time. As much as I attempted to pay attention where it was needed, my eyes often drifted back to her, while the rest ignored her. She didn't seem to ignore the rest. Her eye was constantly drifting amongst everyone, judging by the changes in her countenance. It seemed she was attentive to the proceedings. Eventually, I paid more attention to the work, where it was supposed to be. Things progressed as they always will, and continued as they must. It was mostly the usual arguments, who got what at what time, and who will remain allied and who will begin to fight. I felt something pull to me, calling out to me, pleading for help and safety, praying for answers. I generally shrugged these off, but this was becoming a strong force. The room started to quiet as many of the others shared the same feeling. I glanced again to the rear to see the newcomer was having a reaction as well. It turned out she was speaking calmly to some figure draped entirely in black and ragged cloth. After a moment, the figure evaporated and the woman finally stood. She moved towards the center of the room with a hauntingly fluid grace. The jangle of chains as she moved became the only sound that was heard. Every eye and every organ focused on her as she made her way to the podium in the middle of the hall. She stood behind the podium and took a moment to look at every individual in the entirety of the room. She closed her eye and bowed her head slightly before opening it, raising her head before calling out to all in a sing-song voice. "I am Gaia. I now speak before you all to announce, my children, they are coming." End of story. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lord Azrakal, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.